Hello, this is Miss Kathy from Samuel's Library, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today for Little House Lore. Let's get started. The Little House series of books tells the story of a girl and her family living in the olden days, or pioneer days, when most people lived off the land and were not able to buy as many things in stores as we do. They also rarely had access to electricity and technology like we do, and many things that we use every day had not yet been invented for them. The Little House books tell the story of the Ingalls family, who started out in the big woods of Wisconsin and moved several times out west. They are called pioneers because they were going places where others had not yet been before. The family included Pa, Ma, Mary, Laura, and Carrie, and then eventually Grace. The stories begin when Laura was a little girl living in the big woods of Wisconsin with her family, and the reader learns what that was like through the year. Then we learn what it was like to travel west in a covered wagon and about the many adventures the Ingalls family had in Little House on the Prairie. And here we get to know that Pa was hardworking and adventurous. He enjoyed going to new places and living off the land. Let's take a minute and look at the covered wagon in the picture. In the picture, the wagon kind of looks big, but in reality, it probably wasn't much bigger than one of our cars. And you see Pa in the front driving the wagon. He had some horses that were pulling it. Ma's sitting beside him. She was probably holding baby Carrie. And then here in the back, there are Mary and Laura looking at where they had come from. Now, they had to take everything that they would need for their new home in this wagon, and it wasn't that big. Laura and Mary are sitting on their bed where they would be sleeping at night. But if you look at the back of the wagon, you will see a bucket being attached there. You'll see a trunk full of more things, a yoke for when they were ready to start farming in their new location, and there's a wash tub there on the left, and a rake and some other tools on the right. And so their whole wagon was consumed with carrying all their things. They would have all the clothes they could take, all the food they would need, any furniture they wanted, and they also would take the any tools, any furniture, any household supplies that they needed. All their pots and pans had to go with them. So it was a lot for them to take with them and not very much space. So that's why you see these things attached on the outside. Also notice that Jack is there. He's their dog. He's underneath the wagon, and he walks under the wagon, and that helps protect him from the hot sun as they go along. Notice that the wagon is a wagon that's pulled by horses or oxen or donkeys or mules, and it is called a covered wagon because there are wooden bows that go from one side of the wagon to the other and attached firmly, and then all of those are covered up with a big piece of canvas, and that canvas covers the wagon, and it can be pulled tight on each end like a drawstring if they need to keep out wind or rain. So this is a covered wagon, and that's how the Ingalls family and other pioneer families traveled out west at that time. The family travels again in their covered wagon to Walnut Grove, Minnesota, and faces many different adventures, joys, and hardships on the banks of Plum Creek. This picture shows when the family lived in a sod house, also called a soddy. If you take a look at the picture, you'll see that it's like a little cave dug out from a hill. And in the doorway, you see Ma there. And what we need to know about Ma is that she always strived to be civilized wherever they lived. The family had chores that they did regularly on a regular schedule. She taught the family to use their manners, to keep the house clean. She even swept the dirt floor. She always strived for companionship, for church, and for school. And even though they were pioneers in the West, Ma and her girls would strive to be fashionable when the occasion presented itself. Here, Ma would be wearing one of her work dresses, and Laura is wearing a play dress. But if they were going to church or another important social activity, they would wear their best clothes. Then, Pa takes the wagon, and Ma and the girls move by train to De Smet, South Dakota. There, they are the first family to settle near the town. The book that chronicles that first year is called By the Shores of Silver Lake. Many more settlers come to the area, and that next winter is very hard for everyone. The winter storms begin in October and last through April. The book that tells about that is called The Long Winter. Many more settlers eventually come to the area, and that next winter, the next book is Little Town on the Prairie, and it talks about an easier, happier life in town now that the long winter is over, and there are more people in their community. And here we can take a look at the girls of the Ingalls family. Mary's there in the middle with the purple dress. She was always known for being good, using her manners, and acting appropriately. Laura is there on the left, and she's wearing a pink dress, and she was more of a tomboy. She always preferred to be outside and to be loud. She was somewhat impulsive, and being good did not come easily to her. She is the main character of the books. Then we see Carrie in the blue bonnet and dress. And Carrie was small and frail and fearful, but she was loving and encouraging. And then there's Grace in the green dress. Grace was the baby of the family, and her personality was not highlighted as much as the others. These Happy Golden Years tells the story of 15-year-old Laura teaching school to help her family keep her sister Mary at the College for the Blind. It also talks about Laura and her courtship with Almanzo Wilder, whom she eventually marries. The first 4 years is about the beginning of Laura and Almanzo's marriage. Another book that you will enjoy is Farmer Boy. That book tells stories about Almanzo and his family working a farm in New York State when he was a boy. You may choose to read Farmer Boy first, then read all the stories about Laura and her family after that. So that is just an overview of the Little House books. I have read them over and over since elementary school. And when I was a teacher, I read them to my students. And as a mother, I've read them all to my children. And so I highly recommend them to all of you. And as I was preparing for this program, it was such a joy to read them again. So I highly recommend them and hope that you will enjoy them as well. So that's a little bit about the books and the Ingalls family. But what I want to focus on today is how they entertained themselves. Because much of the time they were alone in the big woods, or being the only settlers for miles on the prairie, or snowbound during those long prairie winters. What did they do to keep entertained? Well, As age appropriate, Laura and her sisters were always expected to help with chores as much as possible. But when it was time to play, what did they do? Well, they used what they had and they used their imaginations. For the most part, the Ingalls family was a poor family and they wouldn't have been able to go to the store and buy toys. So Ma made paper dolls for the girls and Pa whittled a little man out of a stick for Laura's birthday. They played with things out of doors. Once, when they were visiting cousins, Little House in the Big Woods says, now, Mary was the oldest, and she wanted to play a quiet, ladylike play. So in the afternoon, the cousins made a playhouse in the yard. The stumps were chairs and tables and stoves, and leaves were dishes, and sticks were the children. Sometimes Laura and Mary would play in their attic, where food was stored for the winter. They would use pumpkins as tables and chairs while they played. Here's one that I don't like. In Little House in the Big Woods, after they had butchered a hog, this is what they played with. See the picture? Now I'm going to read about Pa. He was blowing up the bladder. It made a little white balloon, and he tied the end tight with a string and gave it to Mary and Laura to play with. They could throw it into the air and spat it back and forth with their hands, or it would bounce along the ground and they could kick it. So what we need to know is, what is a bladder? Well, it is a sac that holds water or some kind of fluid or air. It might be the inflatable lining of a football or basketball, or it might be the part of a waterbed that holds water, or an airbed that holds the air. In a person or animal, it is the part of the body that holds urine before you go to the bathroom. So I say, ew, I don't know that I would have wanted to play with that. At the Christmas described in Little House in the Big Woods, Laura received a rag doll, and you can see her there holding it in the front. The book says, but Laura was happiest of all. Laura had a rag doll. She had a face of white cloth with black button eyes. A black pencil had made her cheeks, and her mouth was red with the ink made from pokeberries. Her hair was black yarn that had been knit and raveled so that it was curly. She had little red flannel stockings and little black cloth gaiters for shoes, and her dress was pretty, pink and blue calico. She was so beautiful that Laura could not say a word. She just held her tight and forgot everything else. Laura named her doll Charlotte. Now let's look at some other rag dolls. As you can see, the rag dolls in this picture were made of scraps of fabric. It didn't take a lot of fabric to make them. And they have yarn or felt hair. And as you can see, their faces were either sewn or drawn on. Now, before Laura got Charlotte, she played with a corncob doll. Remember when you eat corn on the cob and you eat all the kernels of corn and it's so good? Well, the cob is what is left. So they would have rinsed it, they would have let it dry, and that's what she played with for a doll. Now, if you notice on the left, you'll see a corn husk doll, and those have been around for a long time, and they're easy to make using what people have on hand. Corn husk dolls are made by people in many different cultures. However, look at the difference between a corn husk doll there on the left and what Laura had as a little girl. You can see that it's just what's left after you've eaten the corn. And here's the picture of Laura and Mary playing in their attic. And you can see they're using the pumpkins to sit on, and all that food is stored away for them to have during the winter. But now let's talk about how they're playing. Mary was bigger than Laura, and she had a rag doll named Nettie. Laura had only a corn cob wrapped in a handkerchief, but it was a good doll. It was named Susan. It wasn't Susan's fault that she was only a corn cob. Sometimes Mary let Laura hold Nettie, but she did it only when Susan couldn't see. Boys and girls, did you notice how Laura was happy with what she had? And it didn't bother to have her a little corn cob as her doll? What was more important to Laura was that she and her sister were together and playing happily. When I was learning about the toys and games that children played with during the pioneer days, I found out that many of those toys and games had been around for a long time, and many are still around today. Here are some pictures of what else they may have played with. There on the left, you see a hoop and stick for hoop rolling. And the hoops were made of wood, and they would take a stick and use that stick to propel the hoop to make it go forward, and they would go as fast as they could while they could still keep it up off the ground. And sometimes they would have races to see who could go the fastest or the farthest before their hoop fell. There on the top right, you see a sled, and children have been playing with sleds in snow for a long time. Underneath that, you see some children who are having a sack race. Those are burlap sacks, and at one point they would have held some grain or some other food, maybe potatoes or onions. But once that gets empty, it's a good thing to have and to save and to reuse for another purpose. And they could be used for sack races. So the children would have to step inside them, pull them up and hold on tight so that they stayed up. And then at the signal, they would jump along the course and see who could cross the finish line first. And if you fell while you were jumping, well, it was hard to get up and get going again. So that was always a challenge. We have checkers on the top left, and the books talk about Pa going to watch the checkers game at the store. So that's been around for a long time. Underneath that, we have a picture of jacks. And what you do with jacks is you get all those little metal pieces out, all the jacks, and you bounce the ball and pick up one of the jacks while you catch your ball. And then you do it again and bounce the ball and pick up two of the jacks. And you try to keep on doing that in the pattern so that you can keep going with your turn. On the top right, we have marbles. And what happens with marbles is that you determine your playing space. You can use a piece of string to lay out in a circle, or you can just draw your circle on the ground where the marbles are supposed to stay. Everyone puts their marbles in that circle, and then what they do is you have a big marble that you flick and try to push everyone else's marbles out of the circle, and you get to keep those marbles. Underneath that, we have a picture of children playing a string game called Cat's Cradle. And you put the string on your two hands in a certain way, and then your friend takes their fingers and moves the string in a certain way to transfer the string from your fingers to theirs, and you keep going back and forth, and you see how long that you can keep going doing this game. Next, we're going to watch a video of more things that a pioneer family would play.
So far we've talked about all of the chores that the pioneers had to do. But just like you guys, pioneer kids like to have fun with different games and different toys. Now the games that they played would have been things, different tag games and hide and seek. Things that you didn't need a lot of items to play with. But they also had some toys. Hayden here is using a top, and Josie is using what's called a Jacob's ladder. Just a set of blocks and different ribbon, and that goes on and on and on. And here we have a set of pickup sticks, just a bundle of sticks, and how to play the game. You drop them into a pile, and then one person goes at a time. The first person that goes will pick up a stick and continue picking up sticks until they move a different one. And she'll keep picking up her sticks until another one moves, and then it'll be the other player's turn. Oh, I see a little movement down there on the red one. Okay, your turn now. And the green one. Now his turn is over because he moved other sticks. Now, if you take a look at these, imagine being a pioneer child, and this is something that you would have been able to make. You'd find some sticks out there and just whittle them down till they're nice and smooth. This is maybe a game you can play at home. Maybe a pile of pencils would be something that you could do and you could use. Couple last other toys that we have. We have a doll made out of straw, and probably the clothing would have been made out of leftover material from a skirt or from an apron. And this is called the buzzsaw. Works really simple. Wind it up, and then slowly pulling in and out and in and out. And kind of like the Jacob's ladder, this is something that'll go on and on and on as long as you keep doing the motion with it. This is something that can also be made at home if you have a button and two strings, or a string, feed it through the center of the buttonhole, and you can make a buzzsaw at home. I also have two other dolls here. I'll bring them a little bit closer. These are made out of corn husks. The corn husk dries, and they were made into two dolls. Pioneers never wasted anything. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done being a pioneer, but what little free time they had, they liked to play games, just like you guys like to play games.
Thanks for visiting the Danielson Homestead at Prairie Woods Environmental Learning Center.
That video takes place inside the 1888 Danielson cabin at the Prairie Woods Environmental Learning Center in Spicer, Minnesota. And we thank you for the permission to use that video. Back again to this picture of Laura, and you can see her playing there out on the prairie in the grass with Jack, their dog. And Laura always especially liked being outside. She loved running around and exploring the prairie, playing in the creek, and sliding down a straw stack. One thing she found frustrating, though, was that as she got older, it was not proper for young ladies to run and play like the boys. As Laura got older, her entertainment shifted, and it corresponded to people being added to the town where they were living. Rather than playing with toys, she became more focused on the people. There was a school in the town where she lived, so she was able to go to school and make friends there. And the Ingalls family always attended church when they had one in their town. And when the church had revival meetings, or if the school had an exhibition, the whole town, all the people would show up for those events. People also attended church fundraisers and birthday parties, and those events brought people together as well. There was one winter that's described where the whole town looked forward to Friday nights and what they called literaries. It started with a very competitive spelling bee, and they also had music, they had charades, they had debates. They had social things to bring people together, to challenge them, and to entertain. And that was something that was really neat about the book Little Town on the Prairie, is that the people had been so under so much hardship during the long winter, and they had struggled together and they'd helped each other. But now that that long winter was over, they could celebrate, they could spend time with each other, enjoy each other's company, and appreciate each other. Now, if you have read the books, something that you'll notice is that there's something that happens in each of the books. And let's get to the slide. There we are. And that was pause music. We've learned about the life of the Ingalls family through the Little House books. We learned that they made do with what they had, and that they used their imaginations and play, and they spent time outside. And if you've read the books, I hope that you just had some nice reminders about the stories contained in them. And if you haven't yet, I really hope that you will check them out and read them. For someone who has read the books, you know that there was something that happened in each and every book, and that is that Pa would play his fiddle. He would lead the family in song and dance. There were songs for fun, songs for Sunday, songs for celebrations, songs for dancing, and songs for bedtime. So even when the family may have been isolated from other people at times, there was always music and singing and dancing, and they always had each other. This slide has a couple links that you can click on a little bit later to listen to some music that Pa would have played and that are mentioned in the Little House books. The first one, the Arkansas Traveler, is an upbeat, lively tune that they probably would have danced to and clapped their hands. The other one, Golden Years Are Passing By, is one that was a slower tune, more reflective, and Laura may have heard that when she was getting ready to go to sleep at night. And here's a link to a video that you can watch. This video is presented by the Choctaw Indian Nation, and it's going to show you how to make a corn husk doll. Corn husk dolls are something that cultures all around the world have been making for a long time. In America, the settlers would have learned how to do that from the Native Americans. Boys and girls, thank you for watching this program today. I hope to see you at the library. I'd love for you to come and check out those Little House books and read them, and I hope you love them as much as I do. But for now, watch this video about how to make a corn husk doll. They're pretty easy to make, and if you don't have corn husks at home, you can buy them in the Mexican food aisle at the grocery store, or you can get them at craft stores. And if you make one, please bring it into the library so that I can see it. It was wonderful to spend this time with you today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the library soon. If you have any questions about those Little House books, please don't be afraid to ask. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.